The wind howled through the alleyway like a crying wolf, cutting through the thin jacket Arthur wore. The wind howled through the alleyway like a crying wolf, cutting through the thin jacket Arthur wore. He sat on the cold concrete, his legs pulled up to his chest, trying to create a shield against the freezing night air. Beside him, wrapped in an old, scratchy blanket, sat his 6-year-old daughter, Maya. Her small teeth chattered, a sound that broke Arthur's heart into a million tiny pieces. He looked down at his hands, which were trembling not just from the cold, but from a deep, gnawing hunger. In his dirty palms sat a single small cheeseburger wrapped in grease-stained paper. It was the cheapest item on the menu, bought with the very last coins he had scraped together from the bottom of his pocket. His stomach roared, a painful reminder that he had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days. He felt dizzy, and black spots danced in his vision every time he moved his head too quickly. But then he looked at Maya, whose large brown eyes were fixed on the burger with innocent longing. She did not ask for it, because she was a good girl who knew her father was suffering too. She simply watched the steam rise from the wrapper, her little hands clutching the blanket tighter. Arthur knew what he had to do, and there was no hesitation in his soul, only love. He peeled back the paper, the smell of the warm meat and cheese drifting up and making his mouth water intensely. He smiled a weak, tired smile and handed the entire burger to his daughter. "Here you go, princess," he whispered, his voice raspy from the dry air. Maya looked at him, her eyebrows knitting together in concern. "But Daddy, you have to eat too," she said softly, pushing the food slightly back toward him. Arthur shook his head, lying with the ease of a parent trying to protect their child from a harsh reality. "I am not hungry, Maya. I had a big lunch while you were sleeping," he lied. It was the furthest thing from the truth, but he would starve 1,000 times over before he let her feel this pain. Maya hesitated for one more second before her hunger took over. She took the burger and took a big bite, a look of pure relief washing over her small, dirt-smudged face. Arthur watched her eat, feeling a phantom fullness in his own stomach just by seeing her satisfied. He leaned his head back against the brick wall and closed his eyes, trying to ignore the biting cold. How had it come to this? He wondered silently. Just a year ago, they had a warm apartment, a car, and a life filled with laughter. Then came the sickness that took his wife, followed by the crushing medical bills that took his savings. Then came the grief that made it hard to work, and finally, the layoff that took his job. It was a domino effect of tragedy that landed them here on the corner of a busy street, invisible to the world. People walked past them, their eyes glued to their phones or looking straight ahead. To the passers-by, Arthur and Maya were just obstacles on the sidewalk, shadows to be stepped around. A woman in a nice coat walked by, pulling her purse tighter as she glanced at Arthur. The judgment in her eyes stung worse than the winter wind. She didn't see a grieving husband or a loving father. She only saw a failure. Arthur pulled Maya closer as she finished the last bite of the burger. "Was it good?" he asked, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "It was the best, Daddy," she whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. Slowly, the exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted into a restless sleep against him. Arthur stayed awake, playing the role of the guardian, watching the city lights blur through his tear-filled eyes. Across the street, a man in a gray suit had been standing near a bus stop for a long time. He wasn't looking at his phone, and he wasn't looking for a bus. He was watching Arthur. The man, whose name was James, had seen the entire exchange with the burger. James was a wealthy man, a real estate developer who owned half the buildings on this block. But James had grown cynical over the years, tired of people asking him for favors and money. He often tested people to see if they were genuine, and tonight he had seen something rare. He saw a man who was starving, literally shaking from hunger, give his only lifeline to a child. James felt a lump in his throat that he hadn't felt in years. He decided to walk over, his expensive leather shoes clicking softly on the pavement. Arthur tensed up as he saw the shadow approach, his protective instinct kicking in. He prepared himself to be told to move along, to get off the sidewalk. Instead, the man in the suit stopped a few feet away and simply looked at them. "Excuse me," James said, his voice deep and calm. Arthur looked up, his eyes weary and guarded. "Yes?" Arthur replied, keeping his voice low so as not to wake Maya. "I dropped my wallet somewhere down the street," James lied smoothly. "I have no cash to get a taxi home. Do you happen to have any spare change?" It was a cruel test, asking a homeless man for money, but James needed to know the depth of Arthur's heart. Arthur looked at the man, seeing someone who was lost and in need, just like him. Arthur didn't have money, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out a half-empty bottle of water. "I don't have money, sir," Arthur said apologetically. "But if you are walking home, you might need this water. It is a long walk." He offered the water bottle, the only other thing he owned, to the stranger. James stared at the water bottle, his composure finally cracking. This man had nothing, absolutely nothing, yet he was still willing to give. James waved the water away and stepped closer, dropping the act. "I don't need the water, my friend," James said, his voice trembling slightly. "I saw what you did with the food earlier." Arthur looked down, embarrassed. "She is my daughter. She comes first." James nodded, wiping a tear from his own eye. "You are a good father," James said firmly. "Better than most." James reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a warm, thick envelope. But he didn't hand it over just yet. Instead, he took out his phone. "Come with me," James said. "It is too cold for a child out here." Arthur hesitated, but the shivering of his sleeping daughter made the decision for him. They followed James to a nearby hotel, a place Arthur had only ever dreamed of entering. James paid for a room for a week and ordered enough room service to feed a king. That night, Arthur and Maya slept in a bed so soft it felt like a cloud. But the miracle wasn't over. The next morning, James returned, but this time he held a set of keys. He drove them to a small, beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden out front. Arthur looked at the house, confused. "Sir, we cannot afford rent here." James smiled, placing the keys into Arthur's rough hand. "You don't have to pay rent," James said. "I bought this house to flip it for profit. But I realized it would serve a better purpose as a home for a father who understands the true meaning of sacrifice. It is yours, Arthur, free and clear." Arthur fell to his knees on the front lawn, sobbing uncontrollably as the weight of the world lifted off his shoulders. Maya ran to him, hugging his neck, while James watched from the car, knowing he had finally done something that truly mattered. In a world that is often cold and cruel, one act of selfless love had sparked a miracle that changed their lives forever.